A mother saved every penny for 3 months just to buy her children one meal at a cafe. But when they finally got a table, a wealthy woman blocked their path, laughed in their faces, and told them to go to a soup kitchen. The entire cafe watched. People pulled out their phones to record. No one helped. No one said a word. But what this cruel woman did not realize was that the quiet man sitting in the dark corner had been watching everything. He was not just any customer. He was the most dangerous man in the city. And he had just made a decision that would destroy her entire world. What happens next will shock you, but what happens at the very end will change how you see power forever. This is a story about what happens when cruelty meets real power, and why true strength is not about destroying others, but about protecting those who cannot protect themselves. If this message resonates with you, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss a story that matters. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Excuse me, we were waiting for this table. The woman turned, her expensive sunglasses unmoved in the dim cafe. A sneer twisted her lips. Were you really? Harley Waters physically blocked Maria's path to the empty booth. Behind her, the warm green leather seat seemed to mock them, a comfortable refuge that was suddenly impossible to reach. Just look at you, Harley's voice sliced through the cafe's chatter. Ragged children in second-hand coats. People like you belong on the outside, looking in. Her husband joined her, a tall man in a gray suit with slicked-back hair. Elliot Waters took the seat with a casual cruelty, draping his arms over the backrest as if he owned it. Which part of we are sitting here is so difficult for you to understand? He smirked. Maria's words caught in her throat. Charlie's small hand gripped hers tighter. Kevin huddled against the worn fabric of her jacket. Ma'am, we were just… Maria tried again. Just what? Harley's laugh was brittle and sharp. She addressed the entire cafe, her voice ringing with false drama. Can everyone believe this? She pointed at Maria and her sons with disgust. They actually thought they could sit at a nice table. The room fell silent. Conversations died. A teenager by the window raised her phone and started recording. Harley leaned in, Maria's terrified face reflected in her sunglasses. There is a soup kitchen a few blocks from here. That is more your style. Please, Maria whispered, her voice trembling. We saved up for this. Saved what? Your food stamps? Elliot's laugh boomed from the booth, light glinting off his gold watch. This place is for real customers, paying customers. Harley flicked the small reserved sign off the table, letting it fall to the floor like trash. Security, she called out without looking. We have some vagrants that need to be removed. A server hurried over, looking anxious. Ma'am, do you see this? Harley interrupted, gesturing at Maria. Standards have collapsed. They let anyone in now. She probably saw the expensive cars outside and thought she could run a scam. More phones appeared, their lenses pointed at Maria's family. A woman at a nearby table whispered to her friend, her eyes wide. Charlie stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped in shame. Kevin's knuckles were white from gripping his mother's coat, his eyes welling with tears. Maria felt a familiar crushing weight on her chest. It was the feeling of being invisible until someone decided you were in their way. It was a weight she had carried since her husband Richard passed away. I am sorry, she said, the words tasting like ash. We will just go. You will just leave, Harley corrected her, before this gets any more embarrassing for you. The cafe suddenly felt suffocating, the walls closing in. Every person stared. No one helped. Maria pulled her boys back a step, but in a dark corner booth, 3 tables away, a figure finally moved. For the past 5 minutes, Tiago Leal had sat completely still before a small cup of espresso. He wore a black suit with no tie, and the open collar of his white shirt revealed the dark ink of a tattoo. He had been watching since the moment Maria and her sons entered the cafe. He saw them wait patiently. He saw the other customer leave. He saw Harley intercept them. Now, He placed his cup down on the table. The movement was perfectly silent. His dark, unreadable eyes had not blinked. At the next table, one of his men, who had been pretending to read a newspaper, placed his hands flat on the table, ready. Across the room, another man looked up from his phone, suddenly alert. A third man by the counter turned from the menu, his gaze locking with Tiago's. The Waters had no idea their comfortable world was about to be torn apart. The rest of the cafe had no idea the man in the corner was more than just another patron. Tears burned in Maria's eyes as she backed away. "Come on," she whispered to her sons. "Let's go." Harley crossed her arms, a smug look on her face. Elliot grinned from the stolen booth. The teenager's phone continued to record. And then, Tiago stood up. The motion was fluid and calm, but it changed the energy in the entire room. He buttoned his suit jacket with a single deliberate gesture that commanded attention. He started walking toward the booth where the Waters were celebrating their small, cruel victory. His footsteps were quiet on the concrete floor. At the same moment, his other men rose from their tables in silent, perfect unison. Maria stopped, sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Tiago arrived at the booth. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. "Who do you think you are?" Harley snapped. "You are in her seat," he said. His voice was flat, calm, and utterly terrifying. Elliot laughed nervously. "Who are you?" Tiago's gaze shifted to him. He simply stared, and the laughter died in Elliot's throat. "That seat belongs to the lady," Tiago said, nodding toward Maria. Harley took off her sunglasses, her eyes narrowed with rage. "Do you have any idea who we are?" Tiago's expression remained unchanged. "No." He leaned in closer. "But do you know who I am?" The question filled the space between them. Harley's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. The cold certainty in his eyes silenced her completely. "I did not think so," Tiago said. He straightened up and lifted a hand. It was a small signal, but his three men moved instantly. They walked toward the booth, their movements efficient and calm. The cafe was silent. Harley's face turned pale. "What is this?" Two of the men flanked the booth. "Time to go," one said quietly to Elliot. "Do not touch me," Elliot blustered. The man placed a hand on his shoulder. The pressure was gentle, but the command was absolute. Elliot got up. He had no choice. Harley scrambled out after him, her face a mask of confusion and anger. "This is assault! I am calling the police!" "You are leaving," Tiago stated in that same quiet tone. His men guided the Waters toward the door. They did not use force. They simply moved them. The entire cafe watched as Elliot's expensive shoes scuffed and Harley's purse swung from her arm. The phones were still recording a new story now. Tiago turned back to Maria. "Please," he said, gesturing to the now empty booth. "Sit down." Maria was frozen, clutching her children's hands. "It is your table," Tiago repeated. She looked at the green leather, then at her two sons. She looked at the man in the black suit who had undone her public humiliation in less than 60 seconds. "Go on," he urged gently. Maria walked forward, her legs unsteady. Charlie and Kevin slid into the booth, their eyes wide with wonder. The leather was warm beneath them. The cafe slowly came back to life with hushed, urgent whispers. Harley and Elliot were escorted out the door without another word. Tiago returned to his corner, picked up his coffee, and continued to watch over Maria's family, a silent guardian. Maria's hands trembled as she reached for a menu. She did not know it yet, but her life had just been changed. The Waters did not know it yet, but they had just made an enemy who never forgot. Just 4 hours earlier, Maria Martin stood in her tiny kitchen, counting the money on her counter again. $27.43. It had taken her 3 months to save it. She carefully smoothed the wrinkled bills, a single $10 bill feeling like a treasure. "Mom?" Charlie stood in the doorway, his backpack on. His thin jacket was unzipped because the zipper was broken, and she never had the money to fix it. "Are we still going?" His voice was full of a hope she could not disappoint. Maria forced a smile. "Yes, sweetie. Tonight is special." Kevin, her youngest, pushed past his brother, his eyes shining. "To the cafe? The one with all the lights?" For the last 6 months, Charlie had spent every afternoon after school with his face pressed against the glass of that cafe, watching strangers laugh and eat. Lights, gazing at a life so distant it felt like watching a movie. He had whispered to her one November night, his breath making a cloud on the window. "Just one time. Can we go?" Maria had made a promise. And Maria always kept her promises. It meant she ate cereal for dinner 3 nights a week. It meant walking another mile just to save the bus fare. Her hands would ache after scrubbing office floors until 2 in the morning. She stared at the money one more time. $27 could get them 3 sandwiches, perhaps some drinks. If she was very careful, they might even have dessert. It was not a lot of money, but it was all she had. 3 years before, Richard had kissed her goodbye before leaving for his construction job. "Love you," he said from the doorway, his work boots already on. "Love you too." They were the final words they ever shared. The phone rang at 2:47 in the afternoon. An accident at the hospital, a collapse of the scaffolding. Richard was gone before she could get to him. The company sent a bouquet and offered their sympathies. Then their lawyer contacted her. "The investigation," he said, "unfortunately shows it was worker error. We cannot accept any liability." Maria sat in an attorney's office for a free consultation. It was all she could pay for. She listened to him use words like negligence and burden of proof and an uphill battle. "They have resources you cannot match," the lawyer told her gently. "I am so sorry." The funeral used up all of their savings. The burial plot and the granite headstone with his name cost everything. She could not stand the idea of a temporary marker. 3 weeks after that, her landlord increased the rent. Maria started cleaning offices on the night shift for cash. Then she worked at the laundromat in the daytime, sorting clothes that carried the scent of other families. She taught herself to smile when she was exhausted, to conceal the shaking in her hands. When people asked how she would answer, "I am fine, thank you." Fine felt like a word from another language. Charlie and Kevin were growing up too quickly. They no longer asked for new clothes. They stopped mentioning the birthday parties they were not invited to. They stopped talking about the kids at school with phones and tablets and parents who drove cars that worked properly. Kevin began to pack his own lunch when he was in 2nd grade. Charlie figured out how to cook eggs when he was 8. They did not complain, and that felt even worse. Tonight, Maria had studied her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She wore her green jacket, the only one she owned without a hole in the pocket. Her jeans were from a thrift shop, with a careful patch on the knee. She pulled her hair back because there was no time to wash it that morning. She saw a tired woman, a poor woman. She saw exactly who she was. For a second, under the flickering light, Maria thought about canceling. She could make an excuse and save the money for winter coats or Charlie's field trip. Then Kevin knocked. "Mom, are you ready?" She opened the door. She found both boys standing ready, their hair neatly combed and faces scrubbed clean. They wore their finest clothes, which was not saying much, but the effort was clear. Charlie offered a small flower he had picked from the courtyard. It was already half wilted, but he presented it with a love so pure it made Maria's throat ache. "You look pretty," he said. She accepted the flower and tucked it safely into her jacket pocket. "Thank you, my love." They walked the 11 blocks to the cafe, with Kevin's small hand held tightly in hers. Charlie walked a few steps ahead, pretending he was too grown up to hold hands, but he never strayed far. The cafe shone like a warm promise in the distance. Golden light poured from the windows. The scent of coffee and baking bread drifted out into the chilly night air. Charlie stopped a few feet from the entrance. "What if it costs too much?" he whispered. Maria had studied the menu in the window earlier that week. She had memorized the prices and calculated the cost over and over again. "We can afford it," she promised. "Tonight, we can afford it." Kevin was the first to push the door open, triggering a tiny bell that chimed above them. Inside, every single table was occupied. Maria felt her heart drop. The three of them stood awkwardly in the doorway. Customers glanced at them for a moment before looking away. A hostess approached, her practiced smile already beginning to fade as she sized them up. "Do you have a reservation?" "No, but I am sorry. We are completely full this evening." Maria looked from Charlie to Kevin, watching their hopeful expressions crumble. "Please," she said, her voice quiet. "We are willing to wait." The hostess paused. "It could be an hour. We will wait." So they stood by the door, watching other people enjoy their meals and smelling food that was just out of reach. Charlie leaned his head against her hip. Kevin traced invisible shapes on the cold window pane with his finger. 20 minutes crawled by. Then, a man in business attire stood up from his table. He had a phone pressed to his ear. He threw some cash down and walked toward the door without a single glance their way. Glance. The booth was now empty. Green leather with 2 seats. It was perfect. Maria immediately started forward, gently guiding Charlie and Kevin. They were only 3 steps away when Harley Waters blocked their path. In that moment, everything Maria had worked for, the promise, the savings, the one good night for her boys, it all fell apart. Now, sitting in that very booth with her children, Maria could not stop her hands from trembling. The words on the menu were a blur. Charlie sat perfectly still, staring forward. Kevin was gripping her hand under the table, his little fingers squeezing hard. "Mom," Kevin whispered. "What happened?" Maria did not have an answer. The man in the black suit was still in the corner booth, right where he had been. He was drinking his espresso as if he had not just destroyed 2 people's pride with 4 quiet words. A young, nervous waitress came to their table. "Hi. What can I get for you?" Maria's voice was raspy. 3 grilled cheese sandwiches. And water. That is all." Actually, the waitress looked over at the corner booth, then back at them. "Your meal is taken care of tonight. You can order anything you want." Maria just stared at her. "What?" The waitress nodded toward Tiago. He was not looking their way, but Maria understood. "I cannot," Maria began. "Please," the waitress said softly. "He insists." Charlie looked up at his mother. His eyes were wide with questions. Maria felt tears sting her eyes again, but these were different. She looked at the menu and actually read it. "Can we get burgers?" Kevin whispered. "With French fries?" Maria's voice cracked. "Yes, baby, we can get burgers." The waitress smiled. "I will put the order in." As she left, Maria finally let her gaze drift to the corner booth. Tiago met her eyes from across the room. He gave her one simple, respectful nod before turning back to his espresso. Maria did not know his name or why he helped her, but she knew that someone had finally seen her, really seen her, not as a person to be pitied or ignored, but as someone who was worth defending. Charlie rested his head on her shoulder. Kevin's tight grip on her hand finally relaxed. For the first time in 3 years, Maria Martin felt something she had thought was gone forever. Dignity. The burgers came 12 minutes later. Kevin's eyes grew wide. "It is huge." Charlie just stared at his plate, as if it might vanish if he looked away. Maria watched her children eat. She watched them really eat for the first time in months. They were not picking at scraps or trying to make one meal last for 2. They were just eating the way children are supposed to. Kevin got ketchup on his chin. Charlie laughed, and the sound filled an empty space in Maria's chest. She took a small bite of her own burger, but she mostly just watched them. She committed this moment to memory. The warmth, the light, the way Kevin's legs swung beneath the booth because his feet could not reach the floor. Across the cafe, Tiago finished his drink. He stood up slowly, buttoning his suit jacket with a practiced, efficient motion. He left cash on the table, far more than the bill, and walked toward the door. He paused as he passed their booth. Maria looked up at him. "Enjoy your meal," he said in a low voice. It was different from before. It was still controlled, but it was softer, more human. "Thank you," Maria said. "I do not know how to repay you. You do not need to." He glanced at Charlie and Kevin. "They deserve a nice meal." Before Maria could say anything else, he was already at the door. She watched him go. The bell chimed as he stepped out into the February night. 3 other men got up from different tables and followed him. They moved with a smooth, unspoken purpose. Maria had not even noticed them before, but now she could not miss them. Outside, Tiago stood on the sidewalk, surrounded by the city's noise, the traffic, the distant sirens, the constant hum of life. He took out his phone and scrolled through the messages he had been ignoring. The 3 men came out of the cafe behind him. The first was tall and thin, with a scar over his left eyebrow. His name was Ramos, and he had been with Tiago for 6 years. The second man was built like a football player and wore a black leather jacket in the cold. His name was Javier. The third was younger, maybe 30, with sharp eyes that saw everything. They called him Cisco. "Boss," Ramos said quietly. "The Waters family." Tiago did not look away from his phone. "Find out who they are." "Already done." Cisco showed him his own phone. "Harley Waters is married to Elliot Waters, a real estate developer. She has old money, and he has new money from his projects. Are they connected?" "They like to think so. Country clubs, charity events, politicians in their phone." Cisco kept scrolling. "But it is nothing real. They are just social climbers in expensive clothes." Tiago put his phone away. "They humiliated that woman in front of her children." "We saw," Javier said. "They did it because they thought no one could stop them." Tiago's voice was very calm. "Too, because they believed nobody would dare challenge them." Ramos waited. He recognized that attitude well. "Keep your eyes on them," Tiago ordered. "I want their address, where they dine, and a list of everyone they speak to." "You expect them to retaliate?" Cisco asked. Tiago offered a smile that held no warmth. "People like that rarely learn from their first mistake." He began walking toward the black SUV waiting half a block away. His men fell into step behind him. "What about the woman?" Ramos asked. "The mother?" Tiago stopped, his hand resting on the car door. "If she requires anything, you will provide it. Do it discreetly. She should not know the help comes from me." "Understood." Tiago got into the back seat. Javier slipped behind the wheel. Ramos took the passenger seat. Cisco would tail them in his own vehicle. As the car merged into traffic, Tiago glanced back at the cafe. Through the glass, he could see Maria and her son still in the booth. Kevin was laughing at something Charlie had said. Maria was smiling. It was a small, fragile smile, but it was real. Something in that smile made Tiago's jaw clench. He had witnessed too much cruelty in his life. He had built an empire on understanding it, mastering it, and using it when he had to. But he would never stand for cruelty directed at those who could not defend themselves. 20 blocks from there, Harley Waters slammed her car door with enough force to make Elliot jump. "Drive," she commanded. Elliot started the Mercedes, his hands trembling just slightly on the steering wheel. "Harley, maybe we ought to just—" "What?" she snapped, turning on him. "Let some street punk humiliate us in front of everyone?" "People were filming, Elliot. Do you grasp what that means?" He did not seem like a street punk. "I do not care what he was." Her voice climbed into a shriek. "He put his hands on us. He tossed us out of there like we were garbage." Elliot pulled away from the curb, his jaw set. "We probably should not have." "Should not have what? Taken a vacant table?" "We are paying customers, Elliot. We have a right to be in places like that." "Not," she gestured wildly, "some welfare case with her pathetic little kids." Elliot remained silent. He had learned long ago that silence was often the safest choice. Harley took out her phone, her fingers moving furiously across the screen, typing and deleting and typing again. "Who are you messaging?" Elliot asked. "People who can fix this." Her eyes had an ugly glint. "That waiter, did you catch what he said?" When the big man came over, the waiter called him by a name. A name? I missed it. Tiago something. Sounded Spanish. It does not matter. Harley's smile was sharp and cruel. Everyone has a vulnerability, Elliot. Everyone can be handled. Elliot's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Harley, those men with him were his employees. They were probably just friends helping him out. She waved a hand dismissively. "Men like that are all for show. If you push back, they fold." I do not care what you think," Harley's voice turned to ice. "I will not let this go. Do you understand me? I am not the person who gets humiliated. I am the person who wins." Elliot drove on in silence, a heavy feeling settling in his stomach. She had noticed the authority in that man's eyes, the fluid motion, the way his men obeyed a single gesture. These were not hired guards. This was a different kind of power. But Harley was not paying attention. She never did. Back at the diner, Maria cleaned Kevin's face with a napkin. "Can we eat here again?" he asked. One day. Maria's words felt tight in her throat. "Maybe, sweetie. I really liked it," Charlie added softly. "Before what happened." "I know." The waitress came back holding a small paper bag. "Dessert is on us." Maria tried to refuse, but the young woman just smiled before walking away. The bag held 3 chocolate chip cookies. "They are still warm," Kevin whispered. A real smile crossed Charlie's face. Maria felt the sting of tears again. A single night, one dinner, a stranger's kindness. It felt like so much more than it should have. They ate their cookies slowly, enjoying each bite. As they prepared to leave, Maria still left the money she had saved on the table. It was not for the bill, which was paid, but a gesture of thanks for the kind waitress. The February air was sharp against her thin jacket once they were outside. Charlie and Kevin stayed close to her, their bellies full and their bodies warm. "Mom?" Kevin began. "Who was that guy? The one who stood up for us?" Maria glanced back toward the cafe. Its lights glowed warmly. Inside, people were still talking and laughing, living their lives. "I do not know, honey. He was a nice man," Kevin said with certainty. "Yes," Maria agreed quietly. "He was." She kept her next thought to herself, that she would likely never cross paths with him again. She could not know that Tiago Ley was already arranging for her protection, and neither of them knew that the Waters were making phone calls. In 3 days, everything would change. They walked home on streets that felt a little less hostile. Maria held her children's hands tightly, allowing herself to hope, just for this one night, that the world was not a completely cruel place. Behind them, a black SUV waited silently at the corner. Cisco watched them until they were safely inside their apartment building. Then he picked up his phone. "They are home, boss. Safe." "Good," Tiago's voice replied. "Have someone watch the building tonight, just to be sure. It is already handled." The call ended. Cisco lit a cigarette and prepared to wait. In this city, if Tiago Ley decided you were important, you were protected, whether you knew it or not. That night, Harley Waters sat in her penthouse apartment. Her phone was pressed to her ear and her fingers tapped an impatient rhythm on the Italian leather couch. Floor-to-ceiling windows displayed the city skyline like a field of scattered diamonds. Down below, somewhere in those streets, was the man who had embarrassed her. She was going to find him. "Senator Crawford's office," a cool, professional voice said. "This is Harley Waters. I must speak with him." There was a brief pause. "The senator is not available. Can I take a message? Tell him it is regarding his campaign donation, the one I am thinking of taking back." Another pause followed, this one much longer. "Please hold." Harley smirked. Money always worked. Elliot sat on the other side of the room, a glass of bourbon in his hand. He watched her with the tired look of a man who knew better than to argue. The side of his face where the man had grabbed him was still sore. Mrs. Waters. A new voice came on the line, older and more cautious. This is a surprise. Senator, I require information about someone. A man named Tiago, I believe his last name is Spanish. He operates in the city. He has bodyguards. A long silence stretched over the phone line. Mrs. Waters. His tone had changed completely. It was now wary, almost scared. I cannot assist you with this matter. Excuse me? If you are referring to the person I suspect, you need to let this go, right now. Harley's hand tightened around her phone. I am calling in a favor. No favor is worth this. The senator's voice fell to a whisper. Listen to me very carefully. If you had a problem with Tiago Ley, you apologize and you vanish. You do not ask questions. You do not seek revenge. You do not even say his name in public. Who in the world is he? He is someone you do not cross. He is someone I do not cross. She could hear the rustling of papers. I am sorry, Mrs. Waters. I have to take another call. The line went silent. Harley stared at her phone, rage building inside her like steam in a sealed pipe. Elliot took a deep swallow of his drink. Maybe we should just listen to him. Shut up. She scrolled through her contacts and found a different number. It was a private investigator she had used before to intimidate a business partner. The phone rang twice. This is Raymond. I need information. On a man named Tiago Ley. The silence on the other end was instant and total. Raymond? I do not handle cases involving him. The words came out in a rush. I do not care what your budget is. Find somebody else. Wait. He hung up. Harley hurled her phone onto the sofa. Unbelievable. Harley, perhaps this is a warning. A warning about what, Elliot? That we are supposed to accept being humiliated? That we should just let some low-life criminal do that to us? We cannot be sure of that. He had men on standby. Did you see their movements? That is organized crime, Elliot. And organized crime makes enemies. She picked up her phone again, scrolling far down her contact list. She went past the respectable people, the politicians and the lawyers and the socialites. She went to the numbers stored without names, contacts from her father's old life. This was from before the family fortune was legitimate, from a time when the Waters empire was built on threats, handshakes, and laundered money. Before he died, her father had given her a warning. Never contact these men unless you have no other choice. Harley was far beyond desperate. She felt deeply humiliated. For someone like Harley Waters, humiliation was a far deeper wound than any physical injury. The following morning, a man named Griffin sat in a diner on the industrial side of the city. He was 43 years old. His knuckles were covered in scar tissue, and his eyes had seen too much to care about anything. He had done dirty work for anyone with the cash. He had no loyalty and no conscience, only a reputation for efficiency. His phone vibrated. An unknown number. He picked it up. Yes. A mutual acquaintance gave me this number. I need someone taken care of. Griffin casually stirred his coffee. I do not take referrals anymore. How did you get my number? My father was Henry Waters. Griffin stopped. He knew that name. Old school power. Vicious when he had to be. He had been dead for 5 years. You are his daughter. I am. And I will pay triple your standard fee. 4. His name is Tiago Ley. The spoon in Griffin's hand froze. Say that name one more time. Tiago Ley. I want him gone. No. Griffin placed the spoon down with deliberate care. Absolutely not. I have not even explained what I want done. It does not matter. Griffin's voice became cold and flat. You are asking about Tiago Ley. The answer is no. Harley's voice grew louder. I am offering $500,000. You could offer 10 million, and my answer would be the same. Griffin shifted back in the booth. Lady, I have no idea what your father told you about this world, but there are some lines you do not cross. And rule number 1 is that you do not go near certain people. Why? Who is he? He is someone your father would have warned you away from if he had any sense. Griffin rubbed his tired face. Tiago Ley controls the city's entire underworld, not the petty criminals. He runs the real foundation, the docks, the shipping routes, the protection rackets. He owns judges, police officers, and politicians. Then he must have rivals. His rivals are all dead. Griffin's tone was ice. Every last one of them. Do you want to know why? Because Tiago does not play around. He offers no warnings. He refuses to negotiate. If you cross him, you simply vanish. A long silence came from Harley's end of the line. Find another person, Griffin told her. Or even better, whatever he did to you, just forget it. He humiliated me. Then you were lucky. Griffin stood up and dropped cash on the table. Goodbye, Mrs. Waters. Do not use this number again. He ended the call and immediately took the battery out of his phone. If she was foolish enough to pursue Tiago Ley, he wanted zero connection to it when the bodies started to fall. That afternoon, Harley was in her bedroom, staring at her phone. Every person she called had turned her down. Every single one. Senator Crawford, her investigator Raymond, the hired gun Griffin. Even her father's old lawyer had called her back just to tell her to stop. Let this go, he had urged. Whatever took place, it is not worth your life. They all spoke as if she were the one in danger, as if she were the source of the problem. Harley gazed at her reflection in the vanity. She wore designer clothes, her makeup was flawless, and her hair was perfect. She looked like a person of importance, a person who always won. But everyone was acting as if she had made the mistake, as if she were the one who should surrender. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. I heard you need help with a problem. I can assist, but it will be expensive. Harley's heart began to beat faster. She typed a reply. Who is this? Someone who is not concerned about reputations. You want Tiago Ley dealt with? I can do it. $1 million, half of it now. Harley's hands were shaking. All of her instincts were screaming at her. Every professional she had contacted refused the job. But this stranger, whoever they were, was willing. She thought back to the cafe. The shame, the video camera, the way that man had dismissed her as if she were nothing. Her fingers flew across the screen. How can I trust you are for real? You cannot. But you have no other options. Send the money or do not. It is up to you. Harley sat there for 5 long minutes. Elliot was in his study, likely drinking. The penthouse was quiet besides the faint sound of city traffic. She made her decision. I will wire the first payment in the morning. How soon can you act? In 3 days. I need an address and a picture. Harley found the photo. Someone at the cafe had put it online. It was blurry but good enough. It showed Tiago in his black suit, his face calm and terrible. She attached it to her message and then typed the address of the cafe. Then she transferred $500,000 to an account offshore. A text arrived almost instantly. Received. He will be dead by Friday. Harley put her phone down. Her hands were still trembling, but she was smiling. She had won. She always did. She did not realize the person she was texting was not a professional killer. He was an informant, one of Tiago's men. Across town, in a secure location, Ramos was showing Tiago the entire conversation. Tiago scanned it twice. Then he turned to Ramos. Find out everything about the Waters family. Every bank account. Every piece of property. Every secret they have ever tried to bury. I already started, boss. Good. Tiago's voice was steady, almost soft. They have now made this a personal matter. He looked at the photograph Harley had sent, his own face looking back from a stranger's phone. In 3 days, he said quietly, the Waters family is going to discover what real power means. Ramos nodded once and left the room. Tiago remained alone in the silence. He had offered them an opportunity to walk away from this. Instead, they had chosen conflict. He would oblige them. On Friday morning, two men were in a stolen Honda Civic parked 3 blocks from Tiago's office. The driver's name was Kyle. He was 28, a former soldier with a dishonorable discharge. He had worked in security until his drinking problem made him a liability. Now, he accepted jobs that most people avoided. His passenger was older, with graying hair at his temples. He called himself Mitch, but that was not his real name. He had been in this business long enough to know this situation felt wrong. "Is this the building?" Kyle asked, looking at his phone. "That is what she told us." Mitch looked at the structure. It was modern, all glass and steel, a high-end building, the type of place with security cameras everywhere. Kyle lit a cigarette. "Have you ever done a job like this?" "Like what kind of job?" "A high-profile target. Organized crime." Mitch took a moment to answer. "Once. In Detroit, 5 years ago." "How did that turn out?" "I am still here. My partner is not." Kyle blew a stream of smoke out the window. "That is encouraging." "You want—" How reassuring could a job be as a mall security guard? Mitch felt the cold weight of the pistol against his skin. This kind of work paid well for one reason. It was lethal. She was offering $1 million in total. That kind of money could buy peace of mind for a long time, if they survived. He was sure they would. The plan was simple: get in and get out. The target leaves his office at 6:30 every single evening. He walks to the parking garage. It is dark and isolated there. That is where they would strike. Kyle nodded, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. For 2 days, they had watched. Tiago was a creature of habit. He arrived at 8 in the morning. He left at 6:30 in the evening. He always took the same path. He was always alone for 90 seconds, from the building door to his car. 90 seconds was more than enough time. At least, that is what they told themselves. They had no idea they were the ones being watched. 2 blocks away, Cisco sat in a coffee shop. He had a perfect view of their Honda. He had noticed them on the first day. They were two men in a cheap car who stayed too long and never took their eyes off the building. Their surveillance was amateur. It was sloppy. He reported them right away. Tiago's command had been simple: let them make their move. Cisco spoke softly into his phone. "They are still in position, boss." "Good." Tiago's voice was completely calm. "When I leave the office tonight, let them have their opportunity." "Are you certain about this?" "Absolutely. I need to know who hired them. We already have that information. I want them to confirm it for me." Tiago went silent for a moment. "How many of our men are in place?" 8. Javier is waiting in the garage. Ramos has the second floor of the parking structure. We have 4 more in the lobby of the building. 2 are on the street. It is more than enough. "Boss, if anything goes wrong—" "Nothing will go wrong." Tiago's tone was final. "These men are desperate. People who are desperate get careless. Let them be careless." The line disconnected. Cisco took a sip of his coffee and watched the Honda. Kyle was now smoking his 4th cigarette. Mitch kept looking at his phone. They were amateurs. This would all be finished in a matter of minutes. At 6:15 in the evening, Tiago stood in his office. The room was bare. There was a desk, 2 chairs, and windows from floor to ceiling that looked out over the city. There were no family pictures, no art. Nothing gave a clue about the man beyond his work. He fastened the button on his suit jacket and glanced at his watch. He was perfectly on time. Javier's voice came through his earpiece. "We are set, boss." "Good. Be ready." Tiago went to the elevator and pushed the button for the main floor. His face looked back at him from the polished metal doors. He wore a dark suit and had a calm expression. He was a man who seemed suited for boardrooms, not battlefields. But Tiago knew better. The deadliest fights are the ones that happen in silence. The elevator went down without a sound. The doors opened into the lobby. It had marble floors, modern lights, and a security desk. Two guards sat there, pretending to look at monitors. They both worked for Tiago. "Good evening, Mr. Leal," one of them said. Tiago gave a nod and walked to the exit. The February cold hit him the moment he stepped outside. The sun had disappeared an hour ago. Streetlights made long shadows stretch across the pavement. Thiago made a left turn, heading for the parking garage. The sound of his shoes echoed on the concrete. Behind him, he heard the engine of the stolen Honda start. Kyle's hands were trembling. "He is on the move," Mitch said. "Drive slowly." Kyle eased the car into traffic, keeping 3 cars behind their target. Tiago walked with a calm and steady pace. He did not check his phone. He did not glance around. He just walked. "This is too easy," Kyle whispered. "Easy is what we want. Easy is how we get paid." Mitch took out his pistol and checked the clip. 11 bullets. It was more than he would need. They tracked Tiago to the garage entrance and saw him vanish into the dark building. "Stop here," Mitch ordered. "We will go on foot." Kyle pulled the car over and shut off the engine. Both men got out. The night air felt colder now, thicker. Mitch went first into the garage. The walls were concrete, the fluorescent lights were dim. It smelled of oil and gasoline. Their own footsteps sounded deafening. "Where is he?" Kyle whispered. And then they saw him. Tiago was standing next to a black Mercedes. He had his keys in his hand. He seemed completely unaware. His back faced them. It was perfect. Mitch lifted his gun. They moved quickly now, like professionals. 10 feet away, then 5. Mitch's fingers squeezed the trigger. Then a voice came from the shadows behind them. "Drop your weapons." Both of them froze. Kyle turned his head very slowly. Javier was standing there. His gun was aimed. 2 more men stepped out from behind parked cars. Mitch's eyes grew wide. "Oh no," he said. "Drop them." Javier's voice was like ice. Kyle's pistol hit the concrete floor with a clatter. Mitch held his for a moment longer, thinking. "Do not do it," Javier warned. Mitch let his gun fall. By the Mercedes, Tiago turned around. He had known they were there all along. He walked toward them with his hands in his pockets. He looked relaxed, as if he were meeting old friends. "Gentlemen," Tiago said, "you have made a terrible mistake." Kyle's face was white. Mitch stared at the floor. "Who sent you?" Tiago's question hung in the air. There was only silence. Javier moved forward and pushed the barrel of his gun against Kyle's head. "Answer the question. I do not know." "We do not know," Kyle stammered. "You do not know?" Tiago smiled. "You were paid to kill a man, but you do not know who paid you?" "We were hired through a broker." "Which broker?" "I do not have a name. We only have a number and the payment details." Tiago looked at Mitch. "What about you?" Mitch refused to speak. His jaw was clenched tight. His professional pride would not let him talk. Tiago nodded at Javier. What happened next was over in 3 seconds. Javier pistol-whipped Mitch across the face. Mitch fell to his knees. Javier kicked him hard in the ribs. Mitch choked on the pain, curling into a ball. "The name?" Tiago asked, his voice unchanged. "Waters," Mitch coughed out. "Harley Waters? She hired us through a middleman." Kyle's eyes went wide. "Mitch, be quiet." Mitch spat blood onto the ground. "It is done." Tiago bent down to Mitch's level. "How much was her offer?" $500,000 up front, the other $500,000 when you were gone. Tiago nodded his head slowly. "You were never going to see that second payment." Mitch looked up, his eyes filled with confusion. "The middleman who hired you," Tiago explained. "He is one of my employees. The bank account you were paid from belongs to me. Every text message you got, every single instruction, it all came from me." All the color vanished from Mitch's face. "You just paid me $500,000 of your own money to prove Harley intended to have me killed." Tiago stood up. I appreciate your business. Kyle made a sound like a hurt animal. You framed us, Mitch whispered. You framed yourselves, Tiago said, straightening his jacket. You took a contract to end my life. Did you honestly believe I would not find out? Ramos came from the stairwell holding a phone. I recorded everything, boss. A complete confession. Excellent. Tiago looked down at the two men. You now have a choice. You can work for me. You will clean up this mess and provide testimony when I ask. Or, you can say no. And if we say no? Kyle asked. Tiago gave no reply. He did not have to. The silence was the answer. Mitch shut his eyes. We will work for you. A smart choice. Tiago turned to Javier. Take them to the safe house. Get their complete stories. I want to know every detail about their contact with Waters. Every message, every call, all the payment records. Yes, boss. While Javier pulled the two men up, Tiago walked back to his Mercedes. Cisco stepped out of the darkness. What about the Waters? Tiago opened his car door. We will pay them a visit at their home tomorrow night. Do you want us to handle it? No. Tiago got into the driver's seat. I want them to know precisely what they did. And I want them to know precisely what will happen if they are not out of this city in 3 days. He started the car. Fear, Tiago said to himself, lasts much longer than violence. Cisco nodded. The Mercedes drove out of the garage and vanished into the Friday night traffic. Behind him, Kyle and Mitch were being pushed into an unmarked van. The trap had worked flawlessly. Harley Waters had just given Tiago everything he needed to ruin her. On Saturday night, the Waters estate sat on 3 acres in the city's richest neighborhood. It had iron gates, perfect hedges, and security cameras everywhere. It was the kind of home that screamed money before you saw the front door. Inside, Harley walked back and forth in the marble entrance hall, with her phone held tight against her ear. He should have been taken care of by now, she said through gritted teeth. It has been 12 hours since the line went dead. She had tried the middleman all day. Every time she called, the number was disconnected. $500,000 was just gone. There was no confirmation, no body, and nothing on the news. Elliot was in the living room, looking into his 3rd glass of scotch. Maybe we should call the authorities. And tell them what? Harley yelled. That we hired someone to commit a murder and they stole our money? We could just say nothing. We are saying nothing. She threw her phone on the sofa. We were scammed. They were probably professional thieves who knew we were easy targets. Elliot hoped that was true. He wanted to believe it was only about the money. But a feeling of dread was growing inside him. He remembered how everyone had warned her, how people had refused to get involved. He remembered the change in the senator's voice when she said Tiago's name. Harley? He said softly. I think we need to leave town for a bit. What? Just for a little while until this is over. We can take a vacation. Maybe Europe. Or the Caribbean. Harley looked at him as if he had just suggested they surrender. We are not running away. I am not saying we should run. I am saying we should get some strategic distance. From what? A con man who stole from us? A street thug who got lucky? She folded her arms across her chest. We did not do anything wrong, Elliot. Nothing at all. Before he could answer her, every single light in the house went out. They were in total darkness. Harley let out a sharp gasp. What was that? It was probably just a tripped breaker, Elliot said as he stood up. His voice was unsteady. I will go check it. The front door opened. It was not kicked in. It was not broken. The lock clicked open as if someone had a key. Elliot's heart pounded in his chest. Who is there? He called out. Footsteps answered, echoing on the marble floor. They were calm and measured. There was more than one person. Suddenly, the lights flashed on. Tiago stood in their foyer. Javier and Ramos were behind him, followed by 2 more men. At Tiago's feet, Kyle and Mitch lay on the floor. They were bound, gagged, and bruised. Harley let out a scream. Elliot stumbled back, knocking his drink from a table. Glass shattered against the stone. "Good evening," Thiago said, his voice quiet. It was the same calm, controlled voice from the cafe, but here, inside the darkness of their home, it felt heavier. It felt like terror. "How?" Harley stammered. "How did you get in?" Tiago smiled. "Your security system is expensive, but everything has a weakness." He looked down at the men on the floor. These two, for instance, believed they were professionals. Elliot stared at Kyle and Mitch. A slow, horrible recognition washed over him. "You hired them," Tiago stated. It was not a question. It was a fact. Harley's face turned pale. "I do not know what you are talking about." Tiago raised a phone and pressed a button. Her own voice filled the hall. "I want Tiago dead. I will do it. 1 million, half up front." Harley's knees felt weak. "You recorded everything." Tiago put the phone away. "Every message, every payment, every single instruction. You wanted revenge so badly. You never stopped to consider who you were up against." Elliot held up his hands. "Please, we did not mean—" "You meant every bit of it." Tiago's voice grew sharp. "You hired killers. You sent money. You provided my picture and my location." He took a step toward them. "You tried to have me murdered because I prevented you from shaming a widow in front of her children." The accusation hung in the silent air. Harley found her voice again. "You attacked us. You had no right." "I had every right." Tiago's eyes turned to ice. "You want to discuss rights? The woman you ridiculed? She lost her husband 3 years ago. The company she worked for refused to pay any compensation. Now she works 2 jobs just to feed her children, and you chose to humiliate her for entertainment. She was trying to take our table." "It was not your table." Tiago's voice became dangerously low. "It was an empty seat that you took because you think your money makes you superior to her." There was only silence. Javier and Ramos stood like statues. The bound men on the floor were still. Tiago moved deeper into the house, through the foyer and into the living room. He observed the Italian furniture, the original paintings, the crystal chandelier. "A nice home," he commented. "Probably worth what? 4 million?" Elliot said nothing. "I know it is worth 4.2 million, Tiago went on. "I also know about your vacation house in Aspen, your condo in Miami, and your investment accounts with Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs." He turned to face them. "I know about the offshore account in the Cayman Islands, the one you used to cheat on your taxes, and the Shell Corporation in Delaware." Harley's breathing became shallow. "I know everything," Tiago said plainly. "Your accountant is working for me now. Your lawyer was given a very generous incentive to share your records. And your bank manager?" He smiled. "Let us just say he is very cooperative." Elliot collapsed into a chair. "What do you want from us?" "I want you to understand something." Tiago's voice softened, which was somehow more frightening. "You live in this city because I allow you to. You conduct business here because I permit it. The security you enjoy behind these walls exists because men like me keep order. You are a criminal." "I am a businessman," Tiago corrected him. "And you attempted to kill me. That means you violated the most important rule of business. Never challenge someone who holds more power than you do." He walked over to the window and looked out at their perfect lawn. "You have 3 days to get out of this city," he said. "Sell your homes, transfer your money, and disappear. You cannot just do this." "I can," Tiago said. He turned back to face them. "Because if you are still in this city in 72 hours, I will send every document I have on your tax evasion to the IRS. I will leak your offshore dealings to the media. I will make certain that every business associate you have knows you tried to hire assassins." Harley's voice was a faint whisper. "You would ruin us." "No, you would ruin yourselves." Tiago's face remained a mask. "I am giving you a way out. I suggest you take it." Elliot got to his feet on trembling legs. "And what if we go to the authorities? What proof do you have?" Tiago pointed to Kyle and Mitch. "These men now work for me. That recording proves you hired them. The money can be traced directly back to you. He paused. You have no power, no one to help you, and no other choices. Ramos came forward with a folder and gave it to Tiago. Tiago set it on the coffee table. Everything you will need is inside. Recommended real estate agents, lawyers who will not ask questions, and instructions on how to liquidate your assets. He walked quietly toward the door. 3 days. Not a single hour more. He stopped at the doorway. One last thing. His voice became deadly serious. If you even consider trying to get back at me, or that woman, or anyone else in this city, what comes next will not be a warning. He did not need to explain. Javier and Ramos grabbed Kyle and Mitch and dragged them outside. The other men followed. In less than 30 seconds, the house was quiet again. The front door shut with a soft click. Harley stood motionless in her $1 million living room. Elliot stared at the folder on the table. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, Harley's legs gave out from under her. She fell onto the couch, her hands shaking. He was in our house, she whispered. He just walked right in. Elliot opened the folder with unsteady fingers. It contained property listings, numbers for moving companies, and bank transfer documents. Everything was organized and efficient, as if their exile had been planned to the smallest detail. At the very bottom, there was a handwritten note. You were given the opportunity to be decent people. You chose to be cruel. Now you must live with what you have done. Elliot's hands were shaking so much the paper trembled. We have to go, he said. I am not asking you, Harley. His voice broke. He owns this city. You heard what he said. He has our accountant, our lawyer, our bank files, everything. Tears streamed down Harley's face. They were not tears of sadness. They were from rage, from humiliation, and from the crushing knowledge that for the first time in her life, she had been completely defeated. 3 days, Elliot said softly. We pack what we can, sell everything else, and we disappear. Harley did not reply, but she knew he was right. Outside, Tiago got into his Mercedes. They will run, Ramos said from the passenger seat. Yes, Tiago replied, they will. He started the engine. And if they do not, they will learn why nobody gets to cross me twice. The car drove away from the mansion, leaving the waters with their terror and their broken pride. Tiago had learned that justice did not always require violence. Sometimes, it only needed the truth, and the absolute certainty that some men could not be bought, threatened, or stopped. The waters had learned that lesson. They would remember it for the rest of their lives. On Sunday morning, Harley was at her kitchen island with her laptop open, looking at real estate websites. She had not slept at all. Her eyes were swollen and empty. The designer robe she was wearing felt like a costume, an expensive piece of cloth that could not hide what she had become. Later, Elliot came in, holding his phone to his ear. His face was pale. Yes, I know the market is not great right now, but... He stopped to listen. No, we have to sell it this week. The price can be negotiated. He ended the call and looked at Harley. That was the 4th real estate agent, he said softly. They all told me the same thing. Selling this quickly will cost us 20, maybe even 30% of its value. Harley's grip tightened on her coffee mug. So we lose at least $1 million. She had the urge to scream, to break something, but all the fight had left her around 3 in the morning when she finally faced reality. They were getting out of here, one way or another. What about Denver? Elliot asked, showing her a listing on his phone. Your cousin knows people there. We could start a new life. I do not want a new life, Harley's voice cracked. This is our city. This is our home. It was, Elliot corrected her, putting his phone down. The words felt like a physical strike. Harley shut her laptop, stood up, and went to the window that looked out over their pool, their gardens, and their 3 acres of perfectly managed reputation. It was all worthless now. I am going to make some calls, Elliot said. See if I can find a buyer for the Aspen house. He left the kitchen. Harley was alone, looking at her reflection in the glass. 2 days before, she had been powerful, wealthy, and connected. The kind of woman who got reservations at the best restaurants and invitations to exclusive parties. Now, she was on the run. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from her friend Patricia. "Is it true you are selling the house? What is going on?" News was already getting out. Another message came in, this one from the manager of the country club. "Mrs. Waters, we must talk about your membership dues. There appears to be a problem with your account." Harley's hands trembled. She dialed her bank, navigated the automated system, and finally got a real person. "This is Harley Waters. I need to talk to Thomas Chen about my accounts." "I am sorry, Mrs. Waters. Mr. Chen is no longer managing your account." "What? Since when?" "As of this morning, your account has been reassigned." Harley ended the call. Reassigned. That was Tiago's work. He had taken away the people she knew, the ones who might have been willing to help her. She called her lawyer next. "Rothstein and Associates. This is Harley Waters. I need to speak with David right away." There was a pause. "Mr. Rothstein is not available. Please tell him this is an emergency. This is Mrs. Waters." The secretary's voice turned to ice. "Mr. Rothstein has instructed us that you should find a different lawyer. He cannot just do that. He can, and he has. Goodbye." The call ended. Harley just stared at her phone. One after another, her connections were vanishing. It was not a coincidence. Tiago had gotten to them before she could. On Monday afternoon, a moving truck pulled into the Waters' driveway. Harley watched from her window as two men started carrying out boxes. They took furniture she had spent months choosing. They took artwork she had purchased at charity events. All the physical symbols of the life she had created were going into storage. Or worse, being sold for pennies on the dollar because they were out of options. Elliot came to stand next to her. "The Miami condo sold for less than we wanted, but it sold." "How much less?" 18%. Harley shut her eyes. "We have an offer on the Aspen house," Elliot said. "But they want to close in 90 days. We need that money right now." "We need a bridge loan," Elliot stated flatly. "But no bank will give us one. I already tried. Every single one suddenly has lending restrictions that just happen to apply to us." Of course they did. Tiago's influence was everywhere. A car appeared outside. It was sleek, black, and expensive. Harley's stomach sank. "Is that him?" "No." Elliot narrowed his eyes. "It's Patricia." Her friend emerged from the car, wearing designer sunglasses and holding a small gift bag. Harley almost let out a bitter laugh. Patricia was obviously here to witness their downfall. She opened the door before her friend could even knock. "Harley." Patricia's smile was painfully bright and far too sympathetic. "I heard you were moving. I thought I'd bring a little something for the trip." "How thoughtful." Harley's voice was pure ice. Patricia walked inside, her eyes scanning the half-packed living room. The boxes, the mess. "It's all so sudden," she remarked. "What happened?" "A family emergency. Elliot's mother needs us to be closer to her." "In Denver?" How did she know they were moving to Denver? "Word gets around," Patricia said, easily reading Harley's shocked expression. "You understand how it works?" "Yes." Harley understood perfectly. Patricia placed the gift bag on the kitchen counter. "Everyone is talking about what happened at the cafe." Harley's jaw clenched. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, please, the video is everywhere." Patricia took out her phone. "Look, 40,000 views already." She showed Harley the screen. And there it was. Harley blocking Maria. Elliot smirking as her own voice, loud and hateful, said, "People like you do not eat in places like this." Then Tiago stood up. His men escorted them from the booth. The entire humiliating scene was captured in perfect high definition. "Everyone says you picked a fight with the wrong person," Patricia said, her eyes shining with malice. "They say the man in the suit is connected, that he's dangerous." "He is a nobody," Harley choked out. "Is he?" Because the rumor is he controls half of this city. Patricia leaned in closer. And that you tried to have him killed. The color drained from Harley's face. That is absurd. Is it? Patricia's smile became a sharp, cruel thing. Because you are selling your entire life and running to Denver. That does not sound like nothing. Elliot suddenly stood in the doorway. Patricia, I believe it is time for you to go. Patricia stood up straight, carefully adjusting her sunglasses. Of course. I only wanted to say goodbye. She stopped at the door. Oh, and Harley. The club has revoked your membership. The board's vote was unanimous. She was gone before Harley could even think of a reply. The door clicked shut. Harley remained frozen in place. The country club, her entire social life, her reputation, it was all gone. We have to finish packing, Elliot said softly. Harley walked upstairs without a word. She went into her bedroom, the grand suite with the view she had once adored. She began pulling clothes from the closet. Designer dresses, shoes that cost more than most people's rent, handbags she had waited on lists for months to get. All of it felt meaningless now. She had spent years carefully building this life, this perfect image, this version of herself that everyone admired, and it had all crumbled in just 72 hours. Her phone vibrated. It was a text from a number she did not recognize. 48 hours remaining. Harley screamed and threw the phone across the room. It slammed against the wall and shattered into pieces. She collapsed onto the bed, surrounded by expensive clothes and her broken life. For the first time since she was a little girl, Harley Waters truly cried. These were not delicate tears she could hide with sunglasses. They were ugly, body-shaking sobs, because she finally understood the truth. Her money could not protect her. Her connections could not save her. And the man she had tried to ruin was more powerful than anything she had ever encountered. Downstairs, Elliot sat in his office, looking at 2 one-way plane tickets to Denver. They were for Thursday morning, just 2 days away. He had already taken a job at his uncle's firm. It meant less money and less prestige, but it was far away from this city, far from Tiago Leal, and far from the fallout of his wife's pride. His phone began to ring. It was an unknown number. He answered it anyway. Hello, Mr. Waters. The voice was calm and chillingly familiar. This is Tiago Leal. Elliot's blood ran cold. What do you want from me? I want to ensure you understand the agreement. You will leave on Thursday. You will not come back. You will not contact anyone from this city again. You will simply disappear. We are leaving. I give you my word. Your word is worthless to me, Tiago said without emotion. But your fear is not. Remember this fear, Mr. Waters. Remember what it is like to have no power. We never intended. You intended to do exactly what you did. You found someone vulnerable and you decided to attack them. You believed your money made you untouchable. There was a short pause. Now you understand that it does not. The line went dead. Elliot put his phone down with a shaking hand. Upstairs, Harley had stopped crying. The house was quiet, except for the sound of movers packing their entire lives into cardboard boxes. By Thursday, the Waters would be gone, and this city, which they had once called their city, would forget about them completely. They were just another wealthy couple who learned too late that some people cannot be bought, and some lessons will cost you everything. On Tuesday evening, Maria stood at her kitchen sink, carefully washing dishes by hand. The apartment was silent. Her son Charlie was doing his homework at their little table. Kevin sat next to him, coloring with crayons that were worn down to tiny nubs. It had been 4 days since the incident at the cafe, 4 days since a complete stranger had stood up for them. Maria had replayed that moment in her head 100 times. The way Tiago had stood, the quiet power in his voice, how everything changed in an instant. She still did not fully understand it, but she was deeply grateful. A knock on the door made her heart leap into her throat. Mom? Charlie looked over at her. Stay right there. Maria dried her hands on a towel and walked to the door. She looked through the peephole. A man in a black suit was standing in the hall. Her heart stopped. She knew who he was. He was one of the men from the cafe, the one who helped escort the Waters out. Maria opened the door just a crack, leaving the security chain on. Yes, Mrs. Martin. His voice was polite. My name is Ramos. I work for Tiago Lille. Could I have a word with you? Maria's hand tightened on the door. What is this about? He would like to meet with you. Just to talk. Is there a problem? No, ma'am. There is no problem at all. Ramos took out a business card and slid it through the small opening. He is waiting downstairs in a car. He asked if you could spare 5 minutes of your time. Maria looked at the card. It was made of heavy paper with simple text. Thiago Lille, Leo Logistics. I am with my children. They are welcome to come, or I can wait right here with them. Whatever you are most comfortable with. Maria looked back at Charlie and Kevin. They were watching her, curious but not afraid. She made up her mind. Charlie, Kevin, please come here. They were instantly at her side. We are just going downstairs for a few minutes, she told them. I want you to stay very close to me. She slid the chain off and opened the door. Ramos offered the boys a gentle smile. Your mother is very smart. It is always a good idea to stay close. They all went down the stairs together. Maria held onto her children's hands tightly. A black Mercedes was waiting at the curb. The back door swung open. Tiago stepped out. He looked different than he had in the cafe. He was still in a formal dark suit and a white shirt, but his face seemed softer, almost kind. Mrs. Martin, thank you for coming down. He looked at Charlie and Kevin. And thank you both for letting me borrow your mother for a moment. Kevin just stared up at him with wide, curious eyes. Charlie pressed closer to Maria's leg. We can talk right here, Tiago said. I will not ask you to get in the car. I realize that would make you uncomfortable. Maria was thankful for that. What do you need? I wanted to see how you were. I wanted to make sure you and your children were okay after what happened. We are fine. Thank you. Maria's voice trembled a little. For what you did. It was nothing. It was not nothing. Maria's eyes began to water. It was everything. Tiago gave a slow nod. May I ask you a question? Yes. How long have you been? You work 2 jobs? Maria looked at him, startled. It had been 3 years since her husband passed. The cafe was the first real outing she had given her children. Yes, she answered, a wall of defensiveness rising inside her. I saved up. We could afford it. I am sure you could. Tiago raised his hand gently. That is not what I am asking. I am asking because I have an offer for you. Maria said nothing. My business is logistics. I own warehouses, manage shipping, and control inventory. It is all legitimate. He paused. I need a manager for one of my distribution centers, someone to run operations, create schedules, and process payments. Maria's pulse quickened. I have no experience with any of that. For 3 years you have managed a household on an impossible income. You fed and clothed your children. You kept them in school while holding down 2 jobs. That requires more skill than any business degree. But why choose me? Because you have earned a better opportunity. Tiago's tone was direct and sincere. And because I will not allow people to be cruel in my city. Their behavior toward you was unacceptable. This is how I intend to correct it. Maria shook her head. I cannot take your charity. This is not charity. It is a position with a salary, full benefits, and high expectations. He offered her a second card. The job pays $60,000 annually, and it includes health coverage. We also have a scholarship program for the children of our employees. Both Charlie and Kevin would be eligible. Maria just looked at the card. $60,000. It was more than she earned from both of her jobs put together. What is the catch? Her voice was barely a whisper. There is no catch. You come to work. You are dedicated. You perform your duties. Tiago looked directly at her. I do not demand loyalty. I only require that you are competent and truthful. I know nothing about logistics. We will teach you. My staff will provide all the training you need. He stopped for a moment. But I must have your decision quickly. The job begins next week. Maria glanced at her sons. Charlie watched her with intense focus. Kevin had edged a little nearer to Tiago, his curiosity stronger than his shyness. May I have some time to consider it? She asked. Naturally. You have until tomorrow. Call the number on this card. Tiago moved back to his car. Mrs. Martin, whatever you choose, there is something you should know. What is that? The individuals who treated you so poorly are gone. They departed the city yesterday. You will not be troubled by them again. Maria's eyes grew wide. How did you do that? I handled it. His tone was absolute. In my city, nobody harms a family. Nobody. He entered the Mercedes. Ramos gave Maria a slight nod. Be well, ma'am. Then the car drove off. Maria remained on the pavement, clutching the two cards, her sons at her side. Mom, Charlie asked, was he offering you a job? Yes, sweetie. A very good one. Maria glanced down at the cards, seeing the salary, the potential. I believe so, she said softly. I really believe it is. Together, they went back to their apartment. Later that evening, with Charlie and Kevin asleep, Maria sat alone at her kitchen table. She stared at the jar of coins she had collected for months. $27, the price of a single dinner. Then her gaze fell to the business cards. Was this a choice between one dinner and a new life? Maria took her phone and looked at the number, her hands trembling. It felt insane. She was about to accept a job from a complete stranger, a man with a kind of power she could not comprehend. But being cautious had never helped her before. She had been cautious with the construction firm, and they left her with nothing. She had been cautious with her landlord, and he increased her rent without a second thought. Caution meant she would work until she collapsed for barely enough to survive. Perhaps it was time for a risk. Maria called the number. After 2 rings, a voice answered. Hello. It was Tiago. Mr. Lay, my name is Maria Martin. Mrs. Martin, I was hoping to hear from you. I accept the job, she said. I will be dedicated. I will learn it all. I swear I will not disappoint you. I am certain you will not. She could almost hear him smiling. Be at the office on Thursday morning at 9. You can bring your children if necessary. Thank you. Maria's voice cracked with emotion. Thank you, truly. You are most welcome. Good night, Mrs. Martin. The call ended. Maria put down her phone and finally allowed the tears to fall. These were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of hope. On Thursday morning, Maria waited in front of a contemporary glass structure, holding hands with Charlie and Kevin. A sign over the door said, Le Logistics Distribution Center 3. This is the place, she murmured. Charlie glanced up at her. Are you scared? I am terrified. You will be great, Mom, he said with absolute childish certainty. Maria held his hand tighter and walked through the doors. The reception area was spotless and professional. A young woman at the front desk smiled as they entered. You must be Mrs. Martin. Mr. Lee told us you were coming. She got up. My name is Sophia. I will give you the tour, and you must be Charlie and Kevin. Sophia beamed at the boys. We have a room with books and games where you can wait for your mom. 20 minutes after, Maria was standing inside a vast warehouse. Shelves reached up to the high ceiling in long rows. Forklifts navigated the aisles while employees in safety vests used tablets to track inventory. You will be in charge of 43 people, Sophia detailed. You will handle their schedules, manage shipments, and take care of payroll. It seems complex, but you will have help. A man in his late 50s with a kind face walked over. Mrs. Martin, my name is Raymond. I manage the day shift. I will be your trainer for the first month. Thank you, Maria replied. I am grateful for your patience. I have no experience in this field. I did not either when I began, Raymond said with a smile. Mr. Lee can see talent in people that they cannot see themselves. You will be just fine. During the next 2 hours, Maria familiarized herself with the software, reviewed shipping maps, and was introduced to the lead staff. They were all courteous and professional. Nobody judged her by her appearance. She was simply their new boss. Tiago arrived at midday, striding through the warehouse, as if he owned the place, calling out to employees by name. He gave Maria a nod when he got to her. "How is everything so far?" "It is a lot to take in," Maria confessed, "but it is good. Raymond is our finest trainer. Pay attention to what he says." Tiago hesitated. "Are your boys comfortable?" "Yes, Sophia has been amazing with them." "Excellent." He turned to go, but then paused. "Mrs. Martin, there is something else. We have employee housing just 2 blocks away, a 3-bedroom apartment. The rent is reduced for staff if you are interested." A lump formed in Maria's throat. "Mr. Lee, you have given me more than enough. This is included in your benefits. Go see it, there is no obligation." He was gone before she could answer. Later that day, Sophia took Maria and the boys to the apartment building. It was lovely. The sun poured through spotless windows into a full kitchen. The bedrooms were large enough for real beds, a luxury after years of mattresses on the floor. A little balcony looked out over a park. "The normal rent is $1,500 a month," Sophia explained. "For employees, it is only $600 with utilities included." Maria quickly calculated the numbers. Her new income would cover it with ease. "How do I apply?" she asked. "It is already taken care of. The apartment is yours this weekend." Kevin dashed through the vacant rooms with a joyful laugh. Charlie was on the balcony, mesmerized by the view of the park. As Maria observed her sons, she felt a profound release inside her. It was pure, simple joy. 2 weeks passed. Maria was at her new kitchen table, looking over shipping manifests on a company laptop. Her boys were sleeping soundly in their own bedrooms, with real beds and fresh linens. Her phone vibrated, a message from Raymond. "The inventory report was perfect. You learned so fast." Maria smiled. She was settling in. The job was difficult but not impossible. Her team looked up to her. She had even created a more efficient schedule. In the first time since her husband died, Maria felt competent, needed, and appreciated. Her focus was broken by a knock on the door. When she answered, Ramos was there with a small envelope. "Good evening, Mrs. Martin. Mr. Lee sent this for you." Maria accepted the envelope. "What is this?" "It is the approval for Charlie and Kevin's scholarships, a private school, with all costs paid until they graduate high school." Maria's hands began to tremble. "I cannot accept this. It is too generous. This is not a personal gift from him. It comes from the company's benefit fund. Your application was approved." Ramos smiled warmly. "Your sons have earned a good education. This will provide it." He was gone before Maria could speak. She tore open the envelope. It contained acceptance letters from a highly regarded private school. They would start the following semester. Maria collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face, but a smile broke through. On Saturday, Maria brought Charlie and Kevin to the cafe where their lives had turned a corner. She entered with her chin up, her sons walking proudly next to her. There was no anxiety, no humiliation. The hostess knew who she was instantly. "So nice to see you again. A table for 3? "Yes, thank you." They were led to a booth. It was not the one from before, but that was irrelevant. Maria let them order whatever they wanted, not once looking at the prices. They had burgers, shakes, and dessert. When their plates came, Kevin beamed. "This tastes even better than before." "Everything is better now," Charlie added softly. Maria looked at her boys and understood a deep truth. For the past 3 years, she had not been truly living, only surviving. Now, she was finally alive. From a corner booth across the room, a man she knew was watching. Tiago raised his head from his coffee, made eye contact with Maria, and gave her a single, respectful nod. She returned it. Nothing needed to be said. He had restored her dignity when others had tried to take it. He had provided a chance when she was hopeless. He had secured her family's future, not for personal gain, but because he could not stand injustice, and for him, compassion was the only proper response. Maria lifted her milkshake a little in a silent toast. Tiago raised his espresso cup in return. Then he stood, paid his bill, and walked out. Maria watched him leave. She knew she would probably never understand who he was or the reasons he had helped her, but she did understand one thing. Some people use their power to cause pain, while others use it to heal. Charlie grabbed a French fry. Kevin giggled at something on the menu. Maria sat with her children under the warm lights of the cafe, and she allowed herself to feel something she thought she had lost forever. She felt peace. The city continued on outside the window. The traffic flowed. People hurried down the sidewalk. Life went on. But right here, at this table, Maria Martin had everything that truly mattered. Her children were safe. Her future was no longer uncertain. And the woman who had once been shamed in this exact spot now sat here as a person of value. Not because she had money, but because she had worth. And that was something no one could ever take from her. Maria's office had a view of the entire warehouse floor. Now, 3 months into her new job, she had truly earned this space. Her team's productivity had increased by 18%. Shipping mistakes were down to nearly zero. She had even successfully negotiated better rates with two of their biggest carriers. Raymond knocked on the open door. "Do you have a minute?" "Always." He sat down and he looked very pleased with himself. "Corporate is very impressed. They want you to present your new scheduling system at the quarterly meeting." Maria's eyes went wide. "Me? Present to the executives? You are the one who created it. You should be the one to present it." Raymond grinned. "Besides, Mr. Lee specifically asked for you." Her heart started beating a little faster. She hardly ever saw Tiago now. He had kept his word and stayed away after that first week, allowing her to build her own career without his help. After Raymond left, Maria stared at her computer. She had come so far from that terrible night in the cafe. She was no longer the woman who apologized just for being there, or the mother who saved loose change in a jar. Now she was managing 43 employees, and she was about to present to corporate executives. The change was so complete it felt unreal. Then Friday arrived. Maria found herself on the 20th floor, presenting to a dozen executives in a boardroom. Tiago was at the table's far end, his face unreadable. He simply said, "Mrs. Martin, you may begin." Maria started her presentation, and her hands were steady. She laid out her entire system, explaining her analysis of work patterns and how she had pinpointed inefficiencies to redesign the shift schedule. She presented solid data, charts, and financial projections. They fired questions at her, and she answered each one with confidence. When she concluded, a silence fell over the room. The chief financial officer was the first to speak. "This work is exceptional. It should be implemented at all our sites." Other heads began to nod. Tiago leaned back. "Mrs. Martin, this goes far beyond our expectations. A job well done." "Thank you, sir," she replied. After the meeting broke, Tiago motioned for her to wait. Once they were alone, he walked to the window. "How are Charlie and Kevin doing?" he asked. "They are thriving. Their teachers report they are both honor roll students." "Good." He turned from the window. "What about you? Are you happy?" The question made Maria pause. Yes, she realized. For the first time in what felt like forever, I am. That is all I needed to know. He was quiet for a second. "You need to understand, Mrs. Martin. I did not hand you this opportunity. I only moved some barriers out of your way. Everything you see today, you built yourself. You gave me that chance. I only provided you with access. You handled the rest," he stated, his tone firm. "Do not cheapen your own success by giving me the credit." Maria could feel tears forming. "Why did you really help my family?" Tiago considered his answer. I spent my youth watching men like the waters break people like you. I made a promise to myself that if I ever gained power, I would use it differently. Not many powerful people feel that way. No. He started for the door and then stopped. This city forgets most people, Mrs. Martin. But it remembers those who make a difference. You make a difference now. And it is not because of my help. It is because you earned your place. Then he was gone. Maria remained in the empty conference room, her eyes on the city below. Down on one of those streets was the apartment she had left behind. She could almost smell the laundromat where she once folded strangers' laundry and feel the ache from the cleaning jobs that ruined her back. That entire existence seemed a world away, yet she would never forget it. She would not forget the feeling of being invisible, of being ignored and shamed for her poverty. Those feelings would be her anchor, ensuring she remained humble and kind. Later that day, Maria collected Charlie and Kevin from their school. They all piled into the second-hand car she could finally afford. It was not fancy, but it was safe. "How were your days?" she asked them. "It was good," Charlie said. "I received an A on my history report." "I made the soccer team," Kevin added proudly. Pride swelled in Maria's chest. "That is amazing news from both of you." On the drive, Kevin's voice piped up. "Mom, do you ever remember that night at the cafe?" She met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "Sometimes I do. Why do you ask?" "Because that night changed everything for us." "Yes," Maria agreed softly. "It really did." "That man who helped us," Charlie began. "Mr. Lee, is he a good man?" Maria chose her words with care. "I believe he is a very complex man who makes good choices. That is not the same as a good man. People can be both. What truly defines someone is how they decide to use their influence." Charlie seemed content with that answer and nodded. They drove along roads Maria once had to walk, unable to afford the fare for a bus. They passed the very cafe where her life turned around, and the old building where they had fought so hard to survive. The places had not changed, but she had, and that made all the difference. When they got home, Maria cooked a real meal with fresh ingredients, a world away from the stretched portions and old bread of their past. After the boys were asleep, she sat out on her small balcony. The city lay before her, a field of lights like a fallen constellation. Out there, Tiago Lay was likely still working, running his vast enterprise, shielding people she would never meet. And in that same city, the waters were perhaps starting over, maybe learning that cruelty comes with a price. Maria did not forgive what they did, but she no longer felt any hate for them. They had taught her an important lesson. Your dignity cannot be taken from you. It can only be given away. And she would never give hers away again. Her phone buzzed with a message from Raymond. It said, "Congratulations on your presentation. You belong here." A smile touched her lips as she replied, "Thank you for all your help." She put her phone aside and looked up at the stars. The world was still a difficult and unjust place, filled with people like the waters who valued others based on their wealth. But it also held people like Tiago, Raymond, and Sophia. People who could see a person's true worth. People who chose to build others up, not break them down. One man's help had saved her, but her own strength had put her back together. And that was the crucial difference. The city's pulse beat below. Maria inhaled deeply and closed her eyes. The next day, she would go to work and manage her warehouse, support her staff, and raise her sons. She would live a life of substance. Not because she was rescued, but because she had rescued herself, with a little assistance from someone who knew that power without empathy is just another name for tyranny. And here, in this city, on this night, that knowledge was enough. It was more than enough. It was her entire world. Thank you for staying until the very end. Stories like this remind us that our worth is never measured by what is in our wallet, but by what is in our heart. One act of kindness can rewrite someone's entire future. If this story moved you, leave a comment and tell me, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? And let me know where you are watching from. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Now tap on the next video because I promise the next story will leave you speechless. This content was carefully researched, crafted, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful lessons and inspiration to our audience.